Hi, and welcome to Britain's Hidden History live show. This St. George's Day, and a happy St. George's Day to those who are celebrating it. And maybe more of us should be celebrating it than those identifying as English. For Wilson and Blackett say that St. Illyd, Joseph of Arimathea, travelled from his new home in Llanhillyd north towards Brecon, where he left the Llewellyn stone, and on to the present-day Midlands, whose king was then the High King of Britain, Gwirydd, and that's George in English, Arviragus in Latin, to whom Joseph gave a banner of white with a red cross across it, thus making England's flag the oldest in the United Kingdom, and reminding us of our kinsmanship. Now, every year there is a parade in York on St. George's Day, starting at Clifford's Tower and finishing outside York Minster, before returning to the Tower. Today, the Eye of York was busy too, as members of the York Inset Scooter Club set off from the Eye for their annual fundraising ride to the Mended Drum pub in Hewby. Listen to this. They were waved on their way by the club's president, 97-year-old Normandy veteran Ken Cook, who made the headlines earlier this week when he made the train journey from King's Cross, London to York in the cab of an LNER steam engine. Well done, Ken, and thanks for your service. Each rider who took part will be making a donation to the Magnolia Centre, which is the cancer centre at York Hospital. No doubt a great day was had by all. Well, I have fond memories of York, as it is a city we used to visit when I was a child, when we lived near Gainsborough. There's a wonderful railway museum there in which they have a collection of steam engines, one of which is the Caerphilly Castle, and that's an engine that my dad once fired when he worked on the railways in the steam era. Let's take a look at a video short from our roving reporter Andrew James Reeves, and it's all about an ancient burial discovered beneath Clifford's Tower.
Clifford's Tower, York, England. Around the year 1068, William the Conqueror originally constructed a Motte and Bailey Tower here on top of an area that was previously used as a Roman cemetery. In 1902, when works were being carried out to underpin the failing foundations of the tower, a native burial was discovered. Quote, "A burial found in underpinning Clifford's Tower in 1902 was in native rather than Roman tradition. It comprised a crouched burial in a cist formed by 4 pieces of rough sandstone and was covered by a rather larger stone." End quote. The burial was dated to the early Bronze Age.
Thank you, Andrew, and keep your videos coming. Andrew has a great collection of video shorts on different media platforms, especially YouTube, and I particularly liked his video at Castle Howard, where they filmed some of Brideshead Revisited. Well, that was the older main movie. Now, my dad got interested in filmmaking for a short time and bought a Super 8 video camera. Youngsters will know what that is, maybe. His first filming took place at Clifford's Tower. The film ran at 16 frames per second, and he panned his first scene at the tower. Only 3 frames came out on the processed film. 3 frames, not 1/5 of a second at playback speed. Yet when you saw the film, those 3 frames seem to stick in your mind's eye. Hence, we understand the power of subliminal imagery. Do you remember the allegations that 1 frame of a picture of a pint of lager was inserted in cinema movies here and there, causing people to want a drink in the intermission? And again, young people may not know what the intermission is. And now this brings me onto my own filmmaking, and in particular, use of computers. It seems I've inherited some of my dad's skills. I'm the person who sets up the live show program on YouTube, so I'm the one who gets things like the setup for comments wrong. And I'd like to thank those who point me in the right direction so that I might get things right in the future. Apparently, YouTube makes its own mind up about allowing comments or not if you say the video is made for kids, which I've done on some videos. I thought not made for kids affected only the live broadcasts, but no, it also affects those put into the video section. It doesn't affect my own channel. I put them all out as made for kids, and the comments are okay, but they don't like some of ours. I also create the trailer and adverts, and also get those wrong sometimes too. The admins for the Facebook group and the YouTube channel are not the same people. So no doubt I've given both sets of volunteers apoplexy with some of my productions. Apologies to all concerned. So today we have part 1 of a 2-hour joint presentation by Keith Price and Bob Morgan on what Keith calls the Saxon Marathon, ably assisted by David Mosley with his military background. But first, let's have an Arnie video, and the piece is called Nithaguku, the Cuckoo's Nest by Sean Phillips. Thank you, Arnie, that was lovely. And now I'd like to show a picture that came out on the Facebook group. Which is all about Glamorganug's auction. And you'll remember the books from 2 weeks ago. So here's a message from Danielle at the Glamorganug community. Many of you may already be aware of the Glamorganug micronation through previous mentions in live shows. As Indigenous people, our true history is very important to us, and therefore Britain's hidden history is very close to our hearts. We are currently fundraising to represent Glamorganug at Microcon, an international conference of micronations. Angie has very kindly donated a signed set of the King Arthur conspiracy books, that's the republished books, to help our fundraiser. Part 1 is signed by Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. If anyone is interested in placing a bid, best of luck, and place your bid on www.glamorganwg, spelled with a capital G, LAMORGANNWG.org. The draw will take place at noon this Wednesday, 26th of April. And remember, you have to be in it to win it. Now, every week I say that everyone is welcome to contribute a video, and we're still asking for new work. Angela or myself will act as liaison to publish them to Britain's Hidden History YouTube site. If you publish straight to the Facebook group page, let us know that you'd like us to also put your video on the YouTube group channel. That's for copyright purposes. Just message us by finding us on the BHH Facebook group page under members. If you've got video content or a PowerPoint presentation in your video, we'll hopefully include it in the Sunday show. I'm wondering, have you heard of the ancient musical instrument, the carnex? Here's what the National Museums of Scotland say about the Deskford carnex. The carnex was once widespread throughout much of Europe, although only a dozen or so fragments are known to us. It flourished between 300 BC and AD 200 in Western and Central Europe and beyond. Bands of Celtic mercenaries took it on their travels. Carneces were present at the attack on the Greek sanctuary at Delphi in 279 BC. Carneces defied Julius Caesar in Gaul. Carneces faced Claudius when he invaded Britain. They are even shown on a Buddhist sculpture in India, proof of the far-flung connections of the Iron Age world. Yet they are not a purely Celtic instrument. They were also used among the Dacians in modern Romania. Celtic is a complicated term. The idea of a pan-European Celtic culture is a myth. Instead, aspects of art and technology were shared over wide areas among diverse cultures. The carnex was one example of this. And if you check out their website, named Deskford Carnex, you'll see pictures of the pieces of carnex found in 1816 in Scotland. I've seen the occasional video on the instrument being played, and here's one by Ruga Musical Instruments. Thank you, Ruga Musical Instruments. As mentioned in the last show, we have another news item contributed by Bob Morgan. And this time, Bob is talking about the grave found when 5 Mile Lane, that's the road from the A48 to Barry for the Roos Airport in the Vale of Glamorgan, when that was being upgraded. Over to Bob.
This 1,700-year-old skeleton of a Roman mercenary.
Oh, is this the man who was seen as a ghost somewhere? Yeah, 5 Mile Lane.
Yeah, 5 Mile Lane.
And then after they put his head back, he was no longer seen as a ghost, or maybe that's another one.
But again, it's just when the annoying thing on this again is they find the skeleton, and how they determine that he's a Roman mercenary. Did you have a little bit of inscription on and saying, I'm a Roman mercenary, or this is my mercenary pay, or something? He's just a guy from that period, buried with his sword.
Let's say in there
but how do we know he's a mercenary? They come up with these stories, and there's you try and find out. Okay, there must be a reason why they thought he was a mercenary. I've read all the articles I can. I can't find anything to suggest what they've based that assertion on.
When was this? April 2022.
April 22.
I'm sure Carl James Langford has talked about that 5 Mile Lane.
Yes, I think Carl has. And again, associated with it is, we found a Roman villa. And again, okay, well, it's the question Ross kept asking. Okay, where's your proof that it's Roman? So what makes this a Roman? And again, one of the conversations I kept having with Ross was, well, when they say it's a Roman villa, they perhaps, to be fair, perhaps they're not indicating that it's in inverted commas, Roman villa. It's a villa from the Roman period. But it's very sloppy journalism, and if you don't actually make that clear, because it always makes it sound that when they come out with these things, it's always Roman villa, and the automatic assumption is the Romans have made this.
Yeah.
There are only in South Wales. There are only about 4 or 5 Roman villas that they unearthed, and one of them is Carmead, which we don't accept as being Roman. And if Carmead is not Roman, why should all the other ones be Roman? Why can they not be villas built by the natives in a Roman style, or copying or aping the Romans?
In a nutshell, yeah. I mean, that grave, it said there, farming tools and remnants of roundhouses.
Yes, yeah. So there was obviously an Iron Age or previous settlement there before the Romans came, or before the Roman era, and this is what's annoying, because they're not being careful enough, I think, in the wording of what they're doing. Because again, I can't find anything that says that this has definitely been built by Romans. You can just say it is from the Roman era.
Yeah.
But who built it is, they certainly haven't proved that any Roman ever touched it.
I suppose it's a tradition as well that, if you're a farmer, you could be a yeomanry farmer into the Middle Ages. And,
but as I often said to Ross, is when you got to look at the modern day thing as well. When the Americans go into Afghanistan or Iraq, if they want to build a new complex for them, they don't necessarily use their own military forces to build it. They'll go out and get in civilian subcontractors and say, right, we want you to build a building to this specification for us. And that they won't do it themselves, because if they did, they'd have to have more people there, because you'd have to have the people actually doing the building construction work, and then the people guarding them, because otherwise you're putting them at risk. So I don't actually believe that, so all these things, Roman roads, for example, I fundamentally cannot believe that the Roman military built every road that's called a Roman road. they might have been built by civilians under Roman direction. But my belief as well is once someone's worked on a Roman road project, they know how to build the road. Well, when they go back home, and they want a road. Well, hi guys, I know how to build one. And they build it themselves. And so I think a lot of what are termed Roman roads in this country are actually, again, from the Roman era, but not built by Romans. Very difficult to prove nowadays without doing a lot of archaeological work, investigation, which hasn't been done. The other one is that this Roman ford. Now this is a good one, because when this first came out, it just ticks every box for being Roman. And the only other place I can see that similar ford when I was doing some research is in Pompeii. I can't find anything else anywhere like that. And so this was a cobbled ford was uncovered near Evesham. Again, while we do it, not by any archaeological excavation, it's by doing routine waterworks, and then the archaeology people come in to do the rescue dig, because to record what they found. But the interesting thing on this, so you've got the typical Roman ford. Oh, these have got to be Roman cobbles, because no one else can build cobbles like that. But the interesting thing was, if you go back to when that first was announced, when did it say? I haven't got a date on there now, but that was very early in the year. And by the time you come to November, it was no longer Roman. They start backtracking. It appears to be Roman in date. And then, unfortunately, the dating evidence that they got, I've got the I've got you in front of it. Anyway, they didn't get any dating evidence, or the dating evidence they got wasn't Roman. So it was found on the grounds of a medieval G park, so it could equally date to any time before around that. And the ford was, they finally said, rut marks on the stone seemed to indicate the ford was once well used by carts, perhaps over the course of a couple of centuries. Well, if it was that well used by carts over a couple of centuries, one of the first things that happened was if it was a Roman road to start with, the Roman road service would have been well gone by then, over a couple of centuries. And one of the things that I was discussing with Ross was, we were looking at how long it would take for the Romans to build all of the Roman roads that we know of in this country. How long would it take, or how many people would it take to do it? Well, in order to do that, most of the mainstream archaeologists go back to the Wade military roads up in Scotland that were built in the 1700s. And because they've got the first-hand information on how long it took to dig, how many men it took to dig, so they could come down to figures like for one man he could dig a meter worth of road a day, type of thing. So they can do all the calculations to show how long it takes. But one of the things that they found with those Wade military roads was, they built them, and then I think it was about 50 years later, when they needed them again, they had to rebuild them, because in that time they deteriorated.
In just 50 years. Yeah.
Just 50 years. So if you're talking about a couple of centuries worth of use, and if they were well used routes and used by carts, they would have been resurfaced how many times in that period of time? You've only got to look at their own roads, how long we've only had basically tarmac roads in this country for just over a century now. Because the tarmac roads only first came in with the motor car.
Yeah.
And you look at, if you leave a tarmac road, and if you look at the roads that have been diverted and the old road is still there, within 20 years that road has almost disappeared.
Yeah.
So so many people out there today, and they keep calling these Roman roads, and they keep on thinking that's the service that put down by the Romans. Well, it might have been a Roman road, it might have been made by the Romans roads, but that service you see today is not the same surface that they put down.
Yeah, definitely.
It would have been renewed over the years.
I've been reading Carl's book about the Romans in the Vale, and there's a very interesting small chapter, or part of a chapter, on Roman road. And he basically says that they didn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a fallacy and a myth.
Yeah.
And he said they weren't metalled with stone, and when they were when the direction was moved slightly, what was Roman disappeared very quickly.
Yeah.
Because water would find its way into the centre of the lane and cause a furrow, and the hedges would creep in. But he also said that none of them were any wider than a single track, like a small country lane.
No. Well, again, it's one of these misunderstandings. I think how the Roman roads work. The Roman roads themselves were actually there for the troops to provide a solid footing for them. Horses, troops on horses were either side of it, which is why when they built the Roman road, there's one that goes through the forest near Marlborough. There's a Roman road that runs through what is now a forest, and they believe it was a forest in the old days. But the first thing the Romans had to do was get the line fixed through the wood, and then they cut down the trees either side of it so you can't be ambushed. And then what you've got is you form your road, but the road is used for the marching soldiers. People on horseback go down the side of it because the horses, it would damage the horses' hooves and things like that if they did too much work on that. And then of course you've got the horse and carts, so we pull in all of the gear. Now they presumably would have to go on the road on the hard surface. So you would have horses pulling things there, but the troops on horseback would not have been using that road. They would have been on either side of it.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. Yeah.
No, but it's also the fact that they would always clear it when they're building the roads. There's a lot more work than just making the roads because they've got to cut if they're going through treed areas or bushed areas. Even they would clear it all back so they can't be ambushed on the road. So you're clearing a wide section all the time, and then you've got your ditches either side for drainage. You've got your cameras and all the rest of it. And again, the thing is, they've got to bring in all of the stone from somewhere, so there's a lot of stone work involved in sourcing and transporting stone to site. I believe all of that would have been done by the locals. They would have been paying them, so much per cartload. Come and bring me. They wouldn't be going out foraging and finding the stone and putting it into the trucks and bringing it to where they're working. They would have got locals to do that, and pay them to do it.
Thank you, Bob. That was a very interesting item, and more from Bob soon. And now for today's main presentation. We have part 1 of a 2-part presentation with Keith Price and Bob Morgan, ably assisted by David Mosley. Keith is first up, presenting what he calls the Saxon Marathon, a full-scale invasion which resulted in an estimated 5-week campaign across 50 miles of West and Mid Glamorgan circa 551 AD. Bob Morgan then begins his presentation and adds his insights as a surveyor utilising the topography of the area to add to his viewpoint. David Mosley brings his military experience to the table, and thanks to Paul Hartel for providing video of Mynydd Baden and creation of sounds of early medieval battle. Next week we will have part 2 of the presentations and the conclusions drawn, and afterwards I will upload both parts as one standalone item to the YouTube channel. Hello. Well, today I'm with David Mosley, and if you look carefully, you'll also see Llw Archen in the background. I'm with Bob Morgan and Keith Price. And
Hi.
David is our military expert. For today, we'll be talking about the campaign around the Battle of Baden and the marathon of the Saxons, as Keith calls it. And Llw Archen was actually at the Battle of Baden. So over to you then, Keith. Over to you then, Keith.
Right, we'll go straight in and start. If you want to start, Paul?
Yeah. So what have we got here then, Keith?
Right, this is the castle, Pen Castle, which I've borrowed from a couple of castles on the internet. And if you look on the top, you can see the sea. That's the Bristol Channel there. So it's actually in this position on Pen Castle. I'll carry on now. Right, this is the area that they actually landed on. They came, we think, watch it, we're not quite sure, came over and landed there. Now, the main reason I believe, and this is one of the reasons why that was picked, was that they were protected by the Neath River. So if anybody charged them, whatever, they still had to get over the Neath. When they got all their troops there, they then went up to a camp, Mynydd y Gair, which is, if you look on your side over there, I'll just move this over.
How many troops do you think landed there then, Keith?
Well, that's the question. In the records, King Arthur killed 692, I believe, in one charge. Oh, sorry, 962. So it's that was one charge. So that's a hell of a lot. Obviously, maybe there's a bit of exaggeration there, but generally, I should imagine is closer to 100,000, because they fought 5 battles, and then the 5 battles with the last one, which would have, and that was over, I should imagine, a 5-week time. You know, it was timeline. But if you look here, you can actually see that's the cross there, and it's there. I'll just go on a bit. There's the camp. Mm-hmm. Now, all these maps are on, you can get them on the National Library of Scotland, OS Maps. And you can move them around and everything. It's brilliant. Right, so that's the camp there. I'll go back. You can actually see the outlay of that there. Still there. Mm-hmm. Then they got on their feet, and they didn't ride, obviously, but there's a castle here, Mynydd y Dinas, which is overlooking
Port Talbot there, isn't it?
Yes. M4 going up. So you can see it's right on top of the mountain there. We got some tumuluses there, so there might have been a battle or a skirmish of some sort. And then we move forward to Taibach, right? And as you can see, I'll move this around. You can see the outlay of the battlefield there. And if I go on, there's a cairn there. See that cairn? Now, if you look, that's the cross there of the cairn. Can you see the cross on the floor there?
Yes, yeah.
Totally amazing, isn't it? When you think of it. It's not a shadow or anything, that's a cross.
No, it's actual cross, isn't it? Yes.
Amazing. And then they went to Margam Castle. This is, if you look here, you can see the camp. It's there, right? Which is at that point there, right there. And if you've been to Margam Castle, there's the pond, the big pond there. And on again.
Was that Morgan's Castle at Margam Castle that they're talking about now, do you think?
Yeah, that's Margam Castle, yes. It's
the castle's down there, but on the hill.
Churchyard, and there's Margam Castle.
Because somebody's about to put out a film about Morgan's Castle at Margam.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing,
that's John and Rob. Yeah,
that's Rob and John.
Would it be that hill fort though that they?
I don't know where that is.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, it is that hill fort, because neither of them had been there before, and they were going to plan a trip out there.
No, I thought it was. That's why I mentioned it, because their video will tie in very nicely with this.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. They're very knowledgeable boys. They know more about this area than us, I should imagine. You know. Then we go on and we come up into the other camps. And if you look there it is there on the cross. And if I'll just go in, there it is there.
All right, okay.
Which you've got to admit is it's there, isn't it? In all its
shape, yeah. And now you're calling camps. Are you saying that's where the Saxons camped?
It wouldn't. The British were on high ground. This is down the mountain.
Right. So every one of these camps you're pointing out, they're Saxon camps.
Until I tell you it's British camp.
All right. Okay. Spotted.
So yeah, this is the camp. If you can see the cross here, that is the
entrenchments.
Yeah, the entrenchments. You can see them. I've gone in, I think, a bit further. You can see them. See the
yeah.
That's pretty good. And then we've got another camp. And I mean, it's still there. And then we'll go on. Oops. Now this is a British camp. It's up on top of the mountain. And it's an enormous camp. Look at it. It's absolutely enormous. I should imagine that Arthur chose the best camp. And the best place. And of course, this is visible up to the castle. Right? All this side now is visible from here. And then I've picked up a tumuli.
Tumuli is a burial mound, is it?
Yes, but if you look at that, it's something I should have mentioned actually before. If you look at this, the north ends and south and west ends are there. So that means you can pump these into your computer, onto your map on your mobile phone, and you can find these places easily.
Yeah, that's good work, Keith. That's really good work.
So all these locations will have a coordinates.
And we'll try to publish them in a list somewhere then.
Well, if they just make a note, no problem. Again, we got tumuli. I picked these up for them to know. Again, tumuli there. This is all on Baden. There's a British residence here just there.
So now we've reached Baden, have we?
Yeah, this is Baden. Yeah.
Yes.
What do you suppose the British residence
Yeah.
was then, Keith?
All year. Many Badens, many Baden.
Yeah.
On an earlier map, it's marked as a British, as a fortification, a British fortified residence, isn't it?
But it is I'll go back one. That's a British residence, right? But you're right. It's what's it called again?
British fortified residence on one of the maps.
British.
With standing stones next to it as well. And then the next map, it's the site of standing stones. And then I think the next map, it's just stone. And then it's now today on current OS, it's not there at all. But a little post in BHH specifically just on that one part of the map, how it's changed over the last 100 years.
John Pincher would know all this. His grandfather lived in this area on the mountain in one of the old houses, and he's got some good tales. Just go on. Oh, this is a private one. My daughter lives there, and there's the battlefield. It's absolutely amazing. She built a house next door to Baden. And then we come to Llangynoed. This is the village nearest to Baden, and I've been told that it's Llan, meaning the church of Gynoed, who was one of his knights who died in the battle. We'll just go on again, and then we come to, on the left-hand side, you can see Rhyw Tor Cymru. That's a lovely name for a battlefield, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's it there, in Nanty Fathlon. Took me years to tell everybody that.
Yeah. Took me years to learn how to pronounce it.
Yes. My State Golf Club there. And then you can see this dotted line? That dotted line is the British trackway. And I'll go on again. The British trackway has got a common name, and it's called Ela Much, which is the road of the pigs. I surmised that it was called that because I thought it was I still think that the entrenchments were enriched by the pigs, right? I believe that it housed the pigs, so that whatever the weather was, it was muddy, right? Because if you're going to fight in good land, or nothing is it, but if you're fighting in terrible conditions, you know, it is. So that's one of the reasons. But then, to be fair, someone said to me, I think it was John, I'm not quite sure, that the banners that the Saxons had in front of their troops, army, was the boar's head. Am I right in that, thinking that? And which means this proves something beyond any doubt, that this was the route of the Saxon army. In other words, it was called Ela Much because of that. This takes us then to the castle. You've seen the castle there, that on the start, that's where it was positioned. This is, you can see the trackway coming up, and then it goes forward, and see that going down towards Cummer, and that is the British trackway, Ela Much. See 2 minutes there?
Does the trackway stop at Cummer, or does it go further?
Yes, no, it stops at Cummer.
Right.
I'm assuming there must have been a reason why it stopped.
Mm.
So, or why it was built. The roadway is recorded as being 4,000 years old. And that starts in Swansea and goes all the way up to Penn Castle. So if there was no castle there wouldn't be no road. There's no other reason for it. So that castle was Penn Castle, the head castle. So there's a reason for it. Just logical. I'll go on now. That there is the tumulus. That is known as the Glyncama Cairn. It was on a schedule monument. It's no longer a schedule monument. It's disappeared out of all the records because this is now being developed as all this area is being developed as a resort. It's the I can't remember what it's called, but it's the adventure park. Wild Rose, can't remember. Anyway, forward. This goes on then over the mountain, over Glencorrog, and over the mountain to Irvine. And you can see site of battle there. One thing I ought to make you aware of is these battlefields were used more than once.
They were what, Keith? I missed that.
Well, they were used more than once.
Oh, more than once, sorry. Yeah.
They strategically positioned, and you don't go, if a battlefield is used once and it was good, you use it again, wouldn't you?
If you won there, yeah.
Logic. And then you've got tumuli in the area. You can see that. And then I went down to, again, there's more tumuli there. And again, all on the coordinates. And I went down the Cannon Valley, started going down, again, picking up all the tumuli. There it is there. And this takes us down to certain things that are in the Cannon Valley I've picked up so that the coordinates got them. This is actually in Trewbert, but I thought it's called Castle Nose. I don't know if it's directly involved, but I put it down. And this takes us then down into the Cannon Valley. I'm following the tumuli all the way along, you can see. And then this takes us, again, following the tumuli.
This is Eglwyswyn, wasn't it?
And this takes us then to a place called Saxon, which is there. And this was the battle scene where all the rest of the kings of Britain met with Arthur to kill and murder and destroy the Saxon army, who were buried in Beddau, which I believe is the graves.
Mm.
Yeah, Ross thought it might be our graves. Instead of it just being plural, the AU at the end could be our.
Well, maybe they buried all of them then.
Maybe. But if we find another burial, the other side, their graves.
The point is that I've recently discovered that the tumuli could hold up to 1,000.
Mm.
which is ridiculous. But then if you pile them all high, you know, and burn them, that's what you're going to get. And then I've taken that, Bob, which you may be more interested in, is that the Britain Ferry, he came through, look, all the way along there. You're in Margam then, Castle. You come up, that's the Bottle of Baden. There you got your Nanty Fallon, Tor Cymru. There's the castle in Pen Castle. This takes you up the mountain, over Glencorrog to Irvine, and then down the Aberdare, Mountain Ash, Pontypridd, Llantrisant. That's 50 miles, and it's not easy. It rises from sea level. It rises up to 900,000 feet above sea level, well over 1,000 feet. In this area, you've got the zip wire, which has just been constructed. So, you know, what I was hoping to do is to let people know that if they wanted something to do, they could walk, as long as you get permission to get into these places. You know, you can't walk into a field with cows, for example. But, you know, some of it is free, all over the Glencorrog, all the way up. And down into the valley and down to Llantrisant. And there you are.
And if you superimpose the Rhondda Cynon Taf map of monuments, which you can find on their website, the amount of tumuli, etc., burial grounds up by Hirwaun, you can hardly put a mark between them. There's loads of them up there.
Well, I think what you've got to understand is that if you got an army, because this was for one purpose and one purpose only, in my opinion, is that they wanted a base, a location they could survive in. And that castle, Pen Castle, was the obvious, you know, if you think of it, of the whole area there. Look, it's the only place, when you think of it. That's where they have to go. They can control the whole of that area from there. And so the idea was to get enough men, enough soldiers to get a short distance. I think they wanted to go up this way, right? But I think for example, I know that there's a couple of knights killed in that area. There's one where the stone was laid, the Bodvach stone, which was his cousin from Brittany fought in the battle. That's now in Margam, in the Stone Museum. So I should imagine that they would have made, when you think of it, if they stood on top of that mountain throwing stones down, no one's going to go up there. I mean, that's, you know, it's 1,000 feet, you know. And so they wanted them to come this way because this was the only way. It's virtually, it's flatter than anywhere else. And once they get onto that area here, it's a plateau. The whole thing runs virtually on top of the mountains, all the way up to Irvine. So this was planned. This was planned. It was a trap, a booby trap, because when they actually fought the battle, 3-day battle, hell of a battle. I mean, it saved Britain. And they fought that battle, and they then got up to Cummer.
So you're saying they didn't defeat the Saxons at Baden?
Oh, no.
They just weakened each other.
I always thought they did, but they didn't, right? Because why are they going up here? I only followed the tumuli, you know, it's there. There was battles there. So this actually takes you up. Now remember that he burnt everything. He burnt all the mountains. I mean, we've seen forestry fires, haven't we, in this hell. Well, this was what it was.
So the British burned all the mountains, you're saying?
He burnt everything. Everything. There wasn't any food. There was nothing. They poisoned all the water. They just put the dead in there, you know. There was no water. There was nothing. When they got to Penn Castle, it was demolished. This was built with a plan. The plan was always that you could see, you can see from that castle all the way down to there. All the way. So you've got a castle where you can view 3 battlefields. And do you know there is a motorway, an ancient motorway, the British trackway, which runs all the way down here and even joins in with Taibach.
It goes Taibach in it, yeah.
I mean, you couldn't write this, could you? You couldn't. I mean, why would they build? Why would they build a roadway along this? There's a purpose for it. A purpose. It was always there. It was always there, and he knew that if he could draw him up to Cama, up there, then they would have no alternative. If he left the castle up, they'd have been there. We've been speaking to women now. No doubt. So what he did was he demolished it. It was demolished. They tumbled it down the mountain.
When do you think that castle was built, Keith?
I'm changing my mind on this regular, only because of information I'm receiving. I know that the British trackway is recorded from Swansea in this area here as being 4,000.
Yeah. 4,000 years old.
You know, I think they're shy on that. I would say in excess of 5. That's what I'd say. And I'm one day going to prove it.
So that castle is well old, much earlier than anything over by Cwmbran or Caerwen.
It's
the
first castle in Britain. There was no other castle. That's the first building built. Sorry, in my state, in Havant. And it's easy to find out. So all we got to do is, get the excavations done and check. But it will never be checked. I mean, this is now full ahead. They're demolishing everything there
Aren't they doing any archaeological excavations as part of the planning consent for it?
Well, it was originally in the planning, but it's been rescinded, I believe.
Right.
Except for British and the Glyn Camacan. The Glyn Camacan, I believe, maybe in excess of 20,000 years old. And I'm working on that at the moment. I can't tell you anymore. It's being revealed steadily to me. Not. I'm looking at things and finding a lot of things. There's going to be. I'm in the middle of a book. Maybe just starting it actually, but it's getting together, and it's gonna alter how British history is taught. No doubt.
So, from a military point of view, then, Dave, have you got any observations on that route?
I'll be a bit worried about connecting all the tumuli with burials after battles, because tumuli have been used for single people right back to the Neolithic, I think. That's the one thing I'd be worried about there. Strategically, it's not far away from what I was thinking. I thought they might have gone up the Llanfi Valley towards Maesteg, where the actual battlefield is, Maes Cadwa, where that fortified residence is.
Yes.
And also just need to speak to John more as well about the sequence of Saxon locations towards Baden. And I'm used to, in my head, thinking that Baden was a deciding battle. But that's just my opinion, and I think Keith's theory is good. It holds water, but without really knowing the ground and looking at the route with the tumuli on the ground, I wouldn't like to say yay or nay. I think the bit past Port Talbot, that might have been like a feint, or if our armies were coming from like the Cardiff area, as it is in Rhonabwy, they might have been stopped and then turned to go over the up the valleys towards the back of Baden, where the three burial mounds are that are definitely associated with Baden, with that battle, like the Walchen. It's definitely not an up and down route, is it, Keith? Having not actually followed it, or is it? It's generally all high ground, all plateau.
Yeah. Well, basically, you're on sea level in Britain Ferry.
I know that bit. I mean, more around Affon Forest Park from Maesteg to Houghton.
Yeah, well, it's up Baden Hill.
Yeah,
it's an easy walk.
You're onto basically a ridge line at that point.
It's easy, you know. It's not an hard walk. The hard walk, or the right. What happened was, when that castle was demolished, and they couldn't see the castle, right, because they had to get there. And once they walked in there and found it demolished, they had no alternative then but to follow him, Arthur, up the valleys. Otherwise, they'd have to go all the way back. And they weren't there to come back. This was a major invasion. This wasn't a battle, or another battle, and that's it. No, this was an invasion. This was taking over this country. Remember now that he fought them and beat them everywhere, right? And this was about, they've been trying it for hundreds of years, trying to get us. And this was the Vandals and the Saxons plan when they were in Mercia, and they decided that this was a wealthy area. This was where everything was, and they came in to get it. And when you think of it, if they had that castle there, they'd survived. But when they went up there, they were demolished. Now, that's a hell of a thing to say, demolishing a big castle. But it was planned, it was always in the planning. And I think we've got to say that this route was definitely taken because of the Helamach, with the where the banners, when they massed, they had the banners of the pig, the boar, and it's definite. It's what the people saw.
Why didn't they ever rebuild the Pen Castle, Keith?
Sorry?
Why didn't they ever rebuild Pen Castle?
He's done his job.
And they didn't need it any longer. They were over the other side by Killeen at that point, weren't they?
I think something came along and stopped everything.
Oh yeah, I got you.
And it came out of the sky, didn't it?
The comet, yeah.
Yeah,
News on that as well.
Yeah, I like that idea, Keith. I like that.
Well, it's when they got, well, this area here going over Glencorrog is like no land you've seen, right? And you know, it was hard. That was the hardest part. Now, what you've got to remember is they carry all their swords, they carry all their weapons, they carry everything, all their food, all their tents, everything with them, right? And wow, that's enormous. I mean, I say it's about 5 weeks. I mean, I can't, you know, just think of it. If you had to get an army from Britain Ferry, that you lodge up here for a little while until you're ready, till everybody's there, and then you carry along. And then you fight a battle there. Oh, that's going to stop you for a little while. You've got to kill, you know, bury all your dead and everything, and then this, and then this, and that, and that. But it's got to be 5 weeks. Just, you know, I'm just thinking as an ordinary person. I expect, David, you may know more about it. But
3 miles an hour for a laden army.
50 miles.
And how many hours a day could they march, Dave?
But, yeah, you know, this is not just on the level, though, is it, David? It's
No.
This was
No, that's all the deciding factors. You know, I completely agree with them landing there. Initially, I thought they might have mistook one river inlet for another, and that's why they landed further west than you'd expect.
You thought they'd have landed nearer to Pyle or something.
Yeah, but that's an open flank then to the east.
They were not protected.
David, can I show some of my slides now? Because
yeah.
I've got some views similar to yours about as to where they landed and why they landed, etc. And if we can go through that, we can perhaps then come to some kind of a conclusion about that, or some consensus view about it.
Excellent.
Okay. So if you're coming back to the reason why did they come by boat, I think the simple answer is you just look at the map, and if they were coming from England, coming back on land, they would be coming from Gloucester. They go across the Severn, and then they go across the Wye, the Usk, the Ebble, the Taff, the Ely. You know, in order to get into the Vale of Glamorgan, they would have to come across those, and then every one of those rivers, none of them are easy. Some of them aren't fordable or readily fordable, and if they were defended at each river point, it would take them a long time to make their way across. And also, you then got this really long extended supply line, and as you know, so the army marches on its stomach and all of that. They would still need resources. They would still need replacement men. They would still need food and other provisions and ammunition, etc., all coming along. And it would be a very long, extended supply line. But I think the main reason is it depends where they were trying to get to. And in my mind, if you're the Saxons, and you know, it's like the Romans and the Normans, what you're after in Wales, you're not after the hills because there's nothing there. You know, you're after basically the Vale of Glamorgan, which is where Arthur's kingdom really was basically based. You've got all of the written accounts, or basically say Killeen was one of his big bases. We've got Carnarvon, which is up by Cardiff, and then you've got all of the Glamorgan sites. And the issue with it is in terms of then coming across from the sea. The whole of that Glamorgan coastline has got coastal forts all around it as part of the, Wilson and Blackett have sort of highlighted all of those forts. So if you're coming from land, I think you're onto a no-hoper, because at every river crossing, if they're defended, you stand the chance of being pushed back or not making any further progress. And I actually think that the whole of this thing, the Saxons wanted, what they didn't want was the hills and the mountains. They wanted where all the wealth was at that moment in time, and where all the action was, and it was the coast and the Vale of Glamorgan. And so I think that the reason why they came then there was that they came round on a sea route as a means of like I say, getting a large amount of men there quickly without having to cross all the rivers and having a long extended sort of supply route as they fought their way from river to river to river. And it's coming back down to, again, if you look at the topography, when they come in for a landing, there's 3 potential landing sites that they're coming in for here. And the reason I think they've chosen Crumlin and Barrows is because it gives them the protection of the River Neath.
Yeah.
So when they land there, they've got this river. Now this section of the river here, even today, is quite notorious, bad, dangerous. So they got protection from that. Once they come ashore here, at Pant Syson, there's two places named Pant Syson by here. If you get into each of these Pant Syson places, what it does is it stops you being viewed from anywhere across here. You're hidden behind this bit of a hill here, and the other Pant Syson is up in here. And again, you're held, screened by things, so you can land and get all your men and troops hidden from view. And then you obviously got to make your way up to the River Neath to get to a crossing point, which according to Wilson and Blackett, let me go back again. According to Wilson and Blackett, was around about where Neath is today, because they came across via Cefn Saeson. It is one of the places which is further north than where Keith was indicated.
Yeah, there's I think there might be battles there even. Yeah.
So. But if you look at the alternative land, and this is the point that you were making, David, is if you look at Aberarron Burrows, if I can find my this one here, we've looked at this one. If you remember when we went up on top of Mynyddinas, you got the River Neath here, you've got the River Afton here, and then you're on the beach. Oh, this is so annoying. You're on the beach. And then you've got this almost insuperable steep hill up to the top of Mynyddinas. You paint yourself into a corner if you land there, because all Arthur's got to do is put men along the River Afton, and you can't go anywhere. Stick men on top of Mynyddinas. You can't get up that slope because it's almost unassailable. You wouldn't be able to get up to the top there. Your only option at that point would be to retreat. The real landing point would be, as you said, it would be Markham Sands. You've got 7.8 kilometers there of sands where you can land boats. And once you land there, you're then right onto the plain. And if you've got a big force, you just go straight across the plain. And what you do is you force Arthur and all his men up into the hills. That's where if that's in that scenario, the Battle of Baden then would be taking place with Arthur's men ensconced on top of Mynyddinas with all the Saxons coming up from the coastal plain. Now, I don't believe that that happened, because if you look at the detail of the topography of Mynyddinas itself, I don't believe that happened. But the other thing we got to look at then, once you start doing this, is that there's 2 things you got to look at. One is then the battle styles of them. The Saxons were they were huge users of the shield wall. They would have shield walls and men arranged in formation, which is great for defence. They could also use it in offence. Whereas the Welsh were more using like guerrilla tactics. And since the Roman times, in Roman times, they were using chariots, as it's documented, but the Britons were using chariots. By Arthur's time, they were principally relying on horses, cavalry, and they were using guerrilla tactics and hit and run. And they were more, in a sense, more defense orientated, I think, rather than defense orientated. Because if anyone came in, as documented again, when the Vikings and people like that arrived, they burn the plane so that there's no food, and then they'd all retreat up into the hills. And that at that point there, what I can believe then is probably that Cairo up here becomes a central rallying point for all of the forces. You know, if someone comes in and you're forced out of the plane up into the hills, that makes a great base then for you up in there, because it's quite far into the hills, and it's quite well protected, because there's a lot of hill forts between there and you, and the Saxons or whoever's coming down on the plane. And then you'd have a series of attacks coming down from the valleys, trying to get the plane back. Now, the other thing we've got to look at is, right, okay, Crumlin Burrows, that's 1.8 kilometers of sand there. How many people can you actually land on there? How many boats? Now, in Saxon times, if you're looking, for example, look at the Sutton Hoo ship. You know, that's about sort of 30 meters by about 5 meters wide. Most of the ships of the Saxon period were not much wider than 5 meters. So if you're going to land boats up on them and bring them up onto the sand, you'll need a 5 meters linear length of beach for the boat, and then you probably need another 5 meters either side of it in order to unload the men, etc. So you start pulling boats up onto the beach. If you say that you need 10 meters for each boat, 5 meters for the boat itself, and 5 meters for unloading, you're only going to get maximum of 180 ships up onto Crumlin Burrows. Now, each ship at that time, if they could hold 100 men, they would be quite big ships. So you're talking of a maximum of 18,000 people being able to land in ships in, if you like, in one wave. Now, the only way you could land 100,000 there would be for those ships then to retreat and another batch of ships to come in, and you keep on doing that. You'd have to do it 5 times in order to get 100,000 people. Now, it's documented again that what was it? One of the in here. It took. I forget who he is now. When I get that Saxon in? Oh, yeah, Henry V. When he unloaded all his troops, he had 8,000 to 10,000 men at Harfleur, and it took them 5 days to unload the men. You know, it took them 5 days to do that. So if you're talking of each wave of ships taking at least 5 days or more to unload, and you're having to bring in 4 or 5 boats, you're talking 20. You're talking almost a month of boat activity. And I don't think that's what the Saxons were intending. I think that what the Saxons were intending was to a quick. I agree with Keith that this was a once and for all battle. They weren't going to come in here and they were going to take the South Wales away from Arthur. Full stop. This was going to be the maximum. The maximum one opportunity in that generation to do it. So I think that they would go all out. One of the things I've considered is whether you land a small force of, you could probably get 15,000, 20,000 men pushing it. And their job was to come round and actually secure Markham Sands and hold some Markham Sands and then protecting the bigger fleet coming in, which would then, instead of going up into the hills, as Keith is saying, would then just go straight through the plain and push all of the Welsh back up into the hills. Now that seems to me to make more sense than actually the Saxons heading for Cairo as a target.
So basically, you're having a force that creates a beachhead.
Yes.
Albeit in Britain Ferry, let's say 20,000.
Yep.
They come along then Aberafan, and they secure the Morfa beach.
Yep. they were securing Margam Sands and this beach down here, and their job would be to secure that and hold it until the main force landed.
That could be a very good explanation how you get a maximum of people onto that beach.
Yeah.
I mean,
What in that scenario, what I was suspecting happened was, and this is coming back then to your joining the dots. It was they got as far as Tyback,
yes,
and Yapandikara, and that they were to turn back that force which was coming around trying to secure Margam, then got stopped at that point. And then they got, and at that point, their only alternative was to head up then the British trackway, and that's when we start then linking your dots.
Yeah.
You know, so they were coming around in a sweeping movement here, but every time I move my cursor, they were coming up and they're coming round via Neath, and I've lost my cursor here, and Kevin Size. Then they were coming down, crossing over the Navan higher up. And then, as I said, coming down in a wheeling motion, then to get secure Margam Sands, and then you couldn't get down onto that point, got turned back up, and then their only alternative was that's when the chase then starts up the British trackway.
To be fair, that sounds, you know, we are talking of an expedition course, army going in and preparing the landing place, very much.
And then the point was then as they hadn't secured the beachhead, the main force then wouldn't take off, because the thing about the Margam Sands beachhead then is you're not overlooked like Aberrawan Burrows by hills or a mountain behind you. You've got this fairly wide plain area, and there's no cover for you. There's no protection. So if you're landing on, you will be landing. And by that time, Arthur's already worked out what you're up to, because he's seen you guys landing. He will already start having an army heading towards you. And you've got no cover on that beach. So you wouldn't dare risk landing your army, because you haven't got the protection. The whole idea that I've got here is that you had this smaller landing force which would secure the beachhead and to hold it for a couple of days to enable them to get the main force on there. And it didn't happen because they got turned at Tyback. And then they got forced up the British trackway, and as you go, then you just then start joining the dots. You got Munidee Castle, which is the one at Margam, and then you hit the fort, then you hit the enclosure, then you hit the bulwarker, and then at that point, then what I believe happened, I think you've got the other way around. You've got the Arthur being besieged at Bulwarker and the Saxons coming up and forcing him backwards. I believe it's the other way then, because I think that what happened then is we're coming back to the Wilson and Blackett version. Arthur then, knowing that the Saxons had landed over at Crumlin Burrows, he's made the call for all his men. He's assembled them at Ogmore, and then he marches them up the Ford Gurthright up to Moneybaden. And what's happened is the Saxons go as far as the Bulwarker, and there are troops, and Arthur's troops are holding that, and that is the siege which Arthur is coming to break. The Bulwarker is holding out. It's when you look at it in detail as well, the Bulwarker it's lower than where the Saxons would be up on the ridge. So they're in a better position, but they were holding it out, and their job was to hold out long enough for Arthur's guys to get there. And Arthur then brings his guys up from Ogmore, up the Ford Gogsway to actually get to Moneybaden. Now, when you look at the topography of that, then the Saxons then are coming up here to the first fort. And when you start looking then at the existing, you've got all the existing entrenchments which are still there today. When you look at those, they're to the east of that British trackway. So whoever was in those forts is defending someone coming from the east, and they're behind the trackway is behind, and I think that's one of the important key things. The trackway is behind the entrenchments.
Yeah.
So to my mind, that means that that's the Saxons, because I'm convinced that Arthur is coming up from Ogmore. When you look at go down to then Moneybaden, Arthur's coming up the Ford of Guswaith here, and the entrenchments here, this is Moneybaden, this is the high spot. You can see that the entrenchments are protecting that high spot of Moneybaden, both sides. And then they're extended. Now, the entrenchments undoubtedly went a lot further, and there were more of them than we see today because they've been eroded out.
Yeah.
Once you start then going back to the written records that we've got, the written records are quite clear that Arthur hid some of it. Arthur did set a trap, and one of the things in doing that and setting this trap was that he hid his men behind the hill, and he took them off at this point here. From here to the Bulwark, you can see one another, albeit that you've got the valleys in between. But if Arthur put his men down, some of his men down here, they can't be seen. They're hidden from the Saxons, who are up on this ridgeline up here. And they're also they put these. You've got these entrenchments here. What I believe is, and again, it's in the written records. It was in, I think it's in not Gildas, it's in Geoffrey of Monmouth, which is one of the later ones. But what Geoffrey of Monmouth says is that the Saxons at the siege of Baden, they were not in a hill fort, but they were on the hillside because they were confident that their higher numbers that they had compared to what Arthur's men had, or what they could see Arthur had, they didn't need any further protection. So the night before the battle, they were just camped out on the ridgeline up here, which is why I believe that you have these entrenchments here. They're protecting the ridgeline here and protecting Arthur from coming further up the road. And these entrenchments here, I believe, would have gone all the way across the ridgeline at that point. And the Saxons were all out here. And at this point here, there were still Arthur's men still besieged in the bulwark and not giving out.
Thank you, gentlemen. Keith's remarkable detective work in producing the campaign hypothesis and the three men's work we've seen today, discussing it, have produced a serious body of work and may well be the cause of academia finally rewriting some part of the history of the people who call these islands home. And that's not forgetting the great work of Alan Wilson and Barham Blackett, identifying the history to be rewritten in the first place. As it stands, and after we've seen part 2, if you were to call this a work in progress, you would have to agree that huge progress has been made on this part of the historical record. So let's take a look at today's chat up to this point. From this point, I won't be picking it up. Nimble Horse started with his father's father being the engine driver for the last steam engine, the Mallard. That was interesting. And somebody said, I think we've discovered Arnie's new musical instrument, the carnex. That'd be a great one. We'd all be pleased to see that. David Church says some historians call Roman a time period and not the Italian city. Nimble Horse pointed out that Roman roads weren't used by wheeled transport, but the original British roads, Deer Street and Watling Way, were used by chariots. David Church wants to know if the original greasy spoons served runny eggs, and asked if there was a trailer for today. Well, yes, there was, but I may have messed up the link. No surprises there. David also asked if the invaders scouted ahead of their invasion. They must have. Kay Higgs loved Paul Hartel's work. And to be repeated at the end, yeah, it was great, wasn't it? David and Meg started a conversation about toilets. T-Bach, Tie-Bach. Hippie Shake pointed out that the YouTube channel Ancient Historia has a very interesting interview with Marshall Abrahams. And Legolas says that John Pilcher has compiled a great deal on the Battle of Baden and will supply videos soon. I think Keith was trying to get in touch with John and Rob Pierce to partake in the three-person discussion there on the campaign hypotheses. David Church and Meg have provided alternative versions for the naming of Heola Much. Nimble Horse says that the Cruithne refers to the whole tribe of people 800 to 500 BC inhabiting parts of Britain and Ireland. Holistic Media is looking to hire a LiDAR drone to map Mynydd Baden. Won't that be something? Marshall's book is closing in on being published, and she's getting a great deal of help, I think with drawings, etc. Holistic Media has recently looked at the UK Register of Buildings and Monuments in distress and was stunned to find out how many there are on the list and how many are owned by the Crown. I think that's something we all need to look into. Legolas says that there are accounts of the Saxons fleeing to their ships back at Margam. So a 50-mile march inland may have been suicidal. There'll be more about that marathon in part 2. I think when we've all seen part 2 in conjunction with part 1, we'll have a really clear idea of what took place in approximately 550-551 AD. Len says there are 2 more burial mounds seen in 1976. And Marshall loved your work, guys. Modern commentary bringing history to life. A. Hart has wondered if the marathon unfolded in the opposite direction. Hopefully more next week in part 2. Boobleweave questioned Arthur II's age at Baden. and somebody later said he was in his 40s. But I think I read he was born 503 AD in Dunraven Castle, which is close to Ogmore. And at the battle, if that was around 550 to 551, then he would have been maybe 48 to 50 years of age. That explains something that's going to come up in part 2. If you watch part 2, then his age will tie in part 2. And I think he died in 579 AD. So he might have been born in 500 AD, so he might have died at age 79. So he's got to be about 48 to 50 at Baden. Legolas Greenleaf talked about the hill forts at Caerau and the surrounding protection hill forts, and said the British trackway ran to Caerau. David Mosley pointed out the Saxon need for taking high ground forts as part of their invasion. And Black Patchiest Dog pointed out the marshland in the coastal area shown in the maps. So that would be right across from the Neath Crumlin Burrows through to Margam Burrows. Maybe Burrows is the name for the marshland. Boobleweave thinks this is the most detailed analysis of the invasion seen to date. So now, as we near the end of the show, we'll take another look at Arnie again, playing The Nest of the Cuckoos. Thank you, Arnie, making great progress there, and they promised more videos of Arnie's latest songs. Thank you all for joining us and for the kind remarks in the chat, and I hope you all enjoyed our time together. I know I did. Thank you to Angela and the boys, and to all the volunteers working behind the scenes on both the group media platforms. So it's auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, ciao, Nostar, and see you next time. And remember, seek and you will find.
Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it informative. Britain's Hidden History Group has so much more going on our YouTube channel. The one you're watching now, there's a live stream, 8 o'clock UK time every Sunday. We speak to people like Wilson and Blackett, reprint their old books and help produce new ones. We go researching to the tops of mountains, all the way down to the bottoms of caves. Busily recording the books, you can listen to them as well, and looking at mysteries and working out what we're not being taught in schools and preserving it, because the physical and written evidence is rapidly disappearing. You can also find out how to read ancient writing and hieroglyphs using the Welsh language. It's amazing. There's a Facebook group where this is being discussed. Along with a website, you can buy the books and help us. Also, as you can see, there's now a Patreon page where just a few pounds a month will make all the difference in trying to keep the project going and preserve this history for future generations, and also to find out for ourselves what is going on, what is Britain's hidden history. So until the next time,